All right. And we are coming to you all today. This is Alicia from Parenting in Noir. For many of you, you have listened to my journey in terms of parenting, some of the highs and lows related to that. You are also on the journey with me as I've begun to interview various parents as well as experts who are having these lived experiences in different areas that I think are really critical for those of us in the Black community as we're trying to raise those happy, healthy, and whole families. And so my interviewee today is Mr. Barry Wallace. I'm really excited to have a chance to meet him. And so I'll do a quick bit of bio and then we'll jump into the conversation. But Barry, he is a therapist at the All of You Mind, Body, and Spirit Counseling, and that's based in North Carolina. He currently works with individuals, couples, and young adults. He focuses in areas such as addiction, trauma, marital issues, anxiety, various life transitions, and depression. And while he tends to work with Black and Indigenous people of color, he is open to all clients, regardless of race or ethnicity. He's noted that he has worked as a therapist for about 3 years now, loves the space and the work that he can do in it. And he says that he takes a solutions-based and solutions-focused perspective in his work, but also can incorporate a trauma-informed lens as needed for his clients, and that he is always mindful to incorporate some of those self-care mindfulness practices within the work he does. And so that is the brief intro I got for you, Barry. I would love to hear from you in your own words in terms of what you do, and more importantly, how did you get to this place in the journey?
Okay, so what do I do? I think I like to akin a therapist as like maybe like a king's advisor. So, I definitely serve my clients and just analyzing, their kingdom. I like to see, how can we make it better? What are the areas for growth that we can explore, the strengths that the kingdom has going on? Definitely, I got into the work just coming from a primarily psychology based background. I wanted to be a psychiatrist and deal with medicine, but then I kind of figured out that medicine really didn't allow me to interact with people in the space that I wanted to. So I swapped down to psychology, and then I swapped down to clinical mental health counseling. So I'm a graduate from North Carolina Central University. Um, Shout out to the Eagles out there. And yeah, once I started to get into the program, I just really loved the work that I was doing. I volunteered for a local crisis line out of Raleigh that works with adolescents and adults, and they have a teen crisis line. And through that experience, I was really able to see how I was able to impact people in those moments of crisis. And it really made me fall in love further with the work that I do. So after graduating, I started working into addiction, wanting to serve minorities that struggled with different types of chemical addictions or process addictions, and then I started to find my way into trauma, and now I'm just here in this space, doing day to day work, trying to help each person heal themselves one day at a time, and small battles make big journeys.
That is true. And so when you think about the realm of therapy, I think for a lot of us, especially in communities of color, there's a lot of either mystique, there's a lot of stigma, there are a lot of just kind of thoughts that people have that may not be based in really what the practice is. And so for us, as we think about our community coming into the process of therapy, how are you or how have you been making inroads in terms of those conversations with people to really illustrate what therapy is and what it isn't and how they can benefit?
Okay, that's a really great question. I think the first thing is really just destigmatizing what therapy is. I just think a lot of our community, we think therapy is for the, crazy type of folks. But like in the bio last said, therapy can be for something that we can do for life transition. So if you want to elevate yourself or your status, or if there's some part of your life that you need some form of self-examination, it's good to take the time out to examine that with a person that might specialize in being able to apply intervention towards that. So oftentimes for some of my clients, I might not have like a heavy pathology like depression or anxiety. Some of them, they might have something going on like I just want to get promoted at work, and I'm just afraid to ask my boss and be assertive with that promotion, and we kind of step it down, and we get the interventions in place so that they can feel more empowered to make that decision. um, on another type of aspect with it, I think Everyone should really go out to do the consultation with a therapist. Once you go and you can find someone that you might connect with, I'm on Psychology Today, and if you were, for example, to read my bio, there might be something that resonate with you. And what we're in the field of relations, so making and connecting with people, we want you to feel safe in that space to give us whatever that you need. So I often urge everyone, just do the consultation. It's free, 10, 15 minutes, let people know what you got and give us a chance to really show you how we might show up in your life and allow you to examine your life in a different type of lens. So I think, and oftentimes for my consultation, I kind of give people the examples of the therapy that I do, how I feel that it might be impactful, but I also let them know from a clinical perspective, next session I will be analyzing just in case they do have some pathology going.
So you have preempted a few questions that I was going to ask
Oh,
later, but it's good to go ahead and get it out there now. So you mentioned Psychology Today. So
yeah.
for a lot of people, that again, the bigness of therapy and them thinking like, is this a psychiatrist versus a psychologist versus, any of the other spectrums? When we're looking, where are some of those key resources? So you mentioned Psychology Today, but if people are like, okay, I don't know where to start to even begin other than doing a good old fashioned Google search, are there any resources that you recommend for saying, this is a good starting point, and especially if we're perhaps looking for a therapist of color?
Okay. So I know that there's some specialized sites. Like I think there's a therapy for Black girls site. There's a therapy for Black men site. There is Psychology Today, which kind of is more of the more prevalent one, but you can actually search in the parameters and find a therapist that might specialize in racial type of trauma, or a BIPOC therapist. Um, I'm trying to think of other avenues.
And
Sometimes we might tell about ourselves on, like, social media, TikTok. Sometimes they actually have, like, professional groups on things like Facebook, like, there's a EMDR in Color type of group where I imagine clients might be able to kinda get on and, try and reach out for a referral in that type of way. But Psychology Today, I would say, is a really good one. I get a lot of my referrals for them. I do think, if you want to find like a specialized BIPOC, definitely check out the therapy for Black men or the Black girls therapy too as well.
excellent. Yes, that is helpful. And I will drop links into the descriptors later for people who are looking for those recommendations. But just to step back, though, I appreciate what you said about consultations. So I think for many people, that first question is, well, where do I go? Who do I talk to? But then the notion that you actually get to it's almost like going to the store and trying out a pair of shoes or some clothes. You actually can have that conversation, and it's let's see if we work together thing. And so, is that common in your field that for the most part, if people reach out to someone and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, I'd love to just talk to you for that fit, that people should be doing that? Or is that just that some therapists do it and others may still charge for a consultation?
Ooh. I would hope a therapist doesn't charge for a consultation because technically they're not doing clinical work. We
Okay.
can only, bill for the clinical work that we do. Um, For me, I think it's subjective. I would think, ideal therapists would, want to screen out clients that they professionally cannot work with. Like if someone came to me and they say they might have a eating disorder, I don't specialize in that. And I know that, I wouldn't say I'll do more harm, but I'm not doing the best for you. And as a human being, I want you to get the help that you need. So I'm going to send you to the best eating disorder specialist that I know.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, with the consultation, I would say, like, I feel like a lot of therapists tend to do it. I know when I was looking for my own one on Psychology Today that, I they always gave me one. So I think it's really good to definitely do it and really bring, all that you need to the consultation. Like a lot of the times in the descriptor I get, I need therapy, I need help. And it's like, yeah, I'm great that you got there. And I'm going to actually take the stress off and reach out to you first because it's like I'm going to go, oh wow, I really want to help this person. I want to see what I can do. And just schedule it with me or schedule it with whoever you're going to schedule it with, and really just go through it and just kind of have a list of the things that you want to work on. And I might even ask some follow-up questions like, have you looked at it this way? Or what are some things that you're doing? How's your family life? How's your career life? Because, I want to treat the whole aspect of you, not just the problems that you come in with. I want you to make you a better version of yourself.
Absolutely, and that's helpful, and so I think that hopefully will clear up something for people that, number 1, seek the therapist in the locations they are, engage them, ask for those no-cost consultations just to talk it
Mhm.
through, and that there's no hard feelings if you're like, "No, that person was absolutely not a fit. Thank you for your time. Move on to the next one." And that it may be that process that they have to have those conversations with a few different people until they find that fit. Now there is that notion that people are like, "Oh my God, am I gonna have to tell my story over and over and over again?" But I imagine that what you're saying is it really does lend support to you getting to the right place you need to be in terms of treatment, in terms of moving forward by having the repeat of that message so that you can make sure, like, is this what I'm dealing with right now? And again, me being able to communicate that to people. Do you find people though that even in the consultation, perhaps either they're reluctant to really get to the heart of the matter, which I know sometimes with long-term therapy it takes a while,
Oh, yeah.
but if they're reluctant, then you find out later like, "Oh my gosh, there are so many more issues here." And what happens if that's the case where you have this good consultation with a person, they give you kind of, this is the nice little package thumbnail version of what my issue is, and then of course you start doing the heavy lifting and you're like, "Oh my gosh, there are numerous other things that perhaps I'm not a specialist in." Do you bring in colleagues and do kind of companion
Mhm.
treatment, or how does that work?
So just depending on what it is, we are taught to seek consultation from a specialist that, can provide that. Also doing ongoing self-improvement and continuing education for ourselves. So like with the eating disorder, I wouldn't like treat that exactly, but if you came into me and you were working on maybe like trauma involved in that, I'll probably just stick on the trauma side, refer you to the eating disorder specialist, and then I'll just stay in my lane. But yeah, oftentimes it's kind of like that iceberg analogy. We just see the up top and we don't see the underlying. But what I try to do is in that assessment session, that's really where I try to get, more of the information. So I'm asking about how you grew up. I'm asking about who raised you. I'm asking about, your relationships. I'm asking about your sleeping, your eating, what meds you're taking. What are you doing for self care? And oftentimes people don't even know what self-care is. And I'm
Mhm.
just like, okay, we need to do some psychoeducation on this. So I try to do just an analysis of just the whole type of person. And oftentimes I just, see that there's a lot more that we need to work on. But I figure that too.
And so, what are some of the more common mental health disorders or other conditions that you're seeing that people are primarily presenting with? Just so that if anyone's out there listening, they're like, okay, that sounds like something that I'm dealing with. And perhaps they're not naming it per se, but like some of those, kind of key complaints for someone reaching out to you to start that conversation.
Oh, okay. So there is a such thing as, as like overdiagnosing, and we kind of see that in our population with things like ADD and ADHD when it's just, our environmental way and how we might express energy through movement. So I see a lot of like ADHD, anxiety, depression, depending on the facility, maybe like some bipolar disorder, trauma, PTSD, acute stress disorder, racial type of trauma, addiction, chemical or process, gambling. mm, Trying to think anything else. Yeah, I think that's all that I've encountered thus far.
And so, when you think about your clients, are there certain therapeutic methods that you just have offhand, or certain um, approaches that you just know off the bat, this is something that I at least need to consider with this person?
Oh yeah. So from the consultation, I work it in the lens that I operate in. So normally if I might notice something like trauma, I might have this belief of, I'm not good enough. And that's a very salient negative cognition that people have that can generalize to different aspects of their life. So I know once I hear that, I'm not good enough, I'm like, all right, that's some EMDR, that is some CBT, that's
Mhm.
some solution focus. I'm eclectic by nature, so I like to kind of blend in things, and I'm learning new things too. So, yeah, in the consultation, I have a gist, but I am open to exploring different aspects of therapy with clients. Like I might go, I wonder how CBT might work if I did it this way. What if we did some somatic stuff, some movement stuff? What if I just did a little bit of just generic coaching? What if I just put a piece of paper in front of you and rewrite this stuff out? Because you're all in here. But when I'm thinking about it, what would it look like if we actually manifested it out? So yeah, and I think there's not like a one shoe that fits all. We're all different. We're all different parts, and I just kind of like to weave in and weave out which ones might work best for you.
Hmm. And that's interesting because sometimes people come in like they're like, "I want this," and you're like, "That's great, and we can try that." But then recognizing kind of from those conversations, like you said, I may need to layer other things on that the person's never heard of, and so
Mhm.
and introducing them into those new therapeutic concepts in a way that keeps people who are so rigid, like this is what I want and this is how I want it, to recognizing that no, there are numerous ways, like you said, of expression and things along those lines, and so in addition to thinking about a person's treatment plan, many people think about looking at mental health services as problems. I have a problem. I can't cope. I need someone to help me. But the notion that, and again, that I'm trying to get to in terms of people thriving is that sometimes it's maintenance. Sometimes it is just essentially that you may have a moment where things are a little off, but that you may be having a relatively good life. It's not that you're, laying in bed crying every day, but that there is a need to potentially still have those touch points with therapists. And so can you talk a little bit about those people who are like, well, I don't know if I truly have a problem, and again, air quotes, or they're not recognizing it and understanding that almost like physical health, going to the gym, you also do things to prevent problems. And so can you say a little bit more about kind of that approach of
Okay, so I'm thinking like we're talking about people that don't have the pathology, but maybe just want to check in for like a life transition or something like that.
yes.
Okay, so hmm, I feel like if we're in this moment in our life and we're doing a lot of insight, a lot of processing, and we feel like something's going on, it's good to, process that out maybe with someone else. Because there's a reason why you're feeling what you're feeling.
Hmm.
And there's a reason why you're questioning, what you're questioning. The moment that a person goes, I think I might need therapy, I'm like, well, you might as well go. You done manifested it in an atmosphere. I mean, I'm like, what's the worst thing gonna happen? We're gonna say that, oh, we can't fix you. And
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, we're not gonna say that. We're gonna find someone that's a better fit for you. So I think it also the questions way into self-care. If you notice that some of the things that you're doing don't work for you, you notice that you might be defensive of doing those things. And if your mood is just low, life transition, low self-esteem, all that stuff can eventually develop into pathology. It's just maladaptive behavior is repeated over a time until it becomes something real. So yeah, it's always good to check in. As far as like maintenance clients, I have a maintenance client right now and they're doing well. I was just like, this doesn't seem like something we're going to be in long term,
Hmm.
but they like the ability to kind of come into a space and process out. And some people heal in that way. They just need someone to hear them, be non-judgmental. They'll offer them any type of advice and just kind of let them vent. And then that's fine.
And so thanks for that segue, because I think that's it for many people. They're really nervous about the bigness of their mental health needs. They feel like they may always be in therapy whenever they get started, and that this is like that circular process where you're laying on the proverbial couch like every week or every other week. And so in that sense, are there ways that you help your clients to assess success and progress so that they know that this is not necessarily, like I said, we're plugged in for life with one another? It may be more, kind of that acute need, and then we move over into occasional maintenance appointments. But how do you, either you as a therapist or you working with your clients, really assess that success? We're moving to that place where it's not such a crisis mode for people.
Okay. I think that segue into the development of a very, very concise treatment plan. There is like one modality, I think it's like, was it psychodynamic? And that's the thing where you in for like 100 sessions, you on the couch and you analyzing the subconscious mind. And some people like that, but me myself, I don't personally want to see you forever.
Mhm.
My mantra is I got to work myself out the job. So I tell my clients like I'm not going to be that person that's going to sit here and reflect things for you and show you your incongruence. I will do that sometime, but not all the time. I'm solution focused. I'm trying to figure out how can we add this in your life. I'm going to give you homework and I need you to do it. And if you don't do it, that's some resistance. So why
Mhm,
are you not doing it?
mhm,
But so yeah, the treatment plan. If I'm going on to that, like in that first assessment session that I do, we create the goals together. So I'm like, what do you want out of the end of this? What do you want to see? What do you want to have change in your life? And if you are authentic and you give me the goals that you want, I jot them down. And the therapy sessions are based off of those goals. Now I am, fluid where if you bring like a newfound thing, like a breakup and stuff, we can pause to process that. But I always go back to those goals. So for my clients, I go, it's getting a little bit tough for us to figure stuff to talk about in here. Or,
mhm,
I noticed that you've been doing good for a good while, and I don't know what else to bring up. It's about time for us to think about doing once a month. Or how would you feel about, going out on your own? I do have some people that, they graduate and they come back. They go, something just happened and I just need to process with you. I'm like, all right, that's fine. I'm glad that you're back. Catch me up. Let's process it out and then let's get you back where you were.
and so getting into that point of the treatment plan and taking that therapy to to deal with those goals that you mutually create with one another. And you did mention as a part of that plan, homework and things like that. So for people who they're like, homework, I'm just coming to talk and cry or whatever it is, and then I want to go about my business. What do you mean homework? How do you keep people on task to do that? Because I'll be perfectly honest and speaking for me and my therapy experience, I'm like, gosh, hopefully she doesn't remember we talked about that 2 weeks ago or a month ago, and we won't revisit it, and she won't be like, what about I told you to think about sort of thing. So I freely self admit that I have done that where I'm like, maybe she didn't write that down, and maybe we're not going to deal with that again. But like, how do you do that so that if you say no, this was really serious, this was really intense, these were the steps I gave you, do you keep those copious notes so that you constantly go back to that, so that even if they forget it that next session, you're like, no, no,
Yeah,
I didn't forget.
yeah, yeah, that elephant in the room, and you
Yeah.
wanna avoid it, but you've been avoiding that elephant, and like what you said, talk and cry, you can do that with your girlfriends, you paying for this time, so you got to work, and the one thing is, if we everyone's sometimes some people are very particular about how they spend their money, and I
Mhm,
wanna make sure that your money is well spent. So, why are we gonna talk and cry with me? No, you gotta get something out of this. I want you to get something out of this. Because
mhm,
then if you don't, you're not gonna go to therapy again. You're gonna carry that for the rest of your life, have that elephant get bigger and bigger, and it's gonna cause a real big problem.
mhm,
So yeah, I like to I we take, psychotherapy notes, we go back, we go, they said this. And there have been some sessions where I go, 2 or 3 sessions ago, I just want to check in on this. And then the eyes get wide. And I go, yeah, I remember it. I know we were working on this, but I just want to check in. And sometimes I go, how are things going in other aspects of your life? I have to take a pause because people change.
mhm,
Life happens. And you're in that space to do the work. And for the homework, I just say, I'm not gonna sit you and give you like historically school bound homework.
mhm,
When you
mhm,
get it, they go, man, I'm gonna have to do something every day. No, the work that we give you is designed for you to take after the session to utilize to build a mastery so that when these things happen, you have your own tools that you can utilize to solve them without coming back to us. 'Cause we
mhm,
don't want you to stay with us. So, if you do that self-care, that probably can help you in your marriage. If you take that time out, that will help you from saying some stuff so you can bring it back to me. Because if you keep bringing back to me the same fight and you're not doing the same thing, I'm going to look. I don't think this is going to work because
mhm.
I don't think y'all are ready to do the work just yet.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to put a pin on that family thing. I will definitely come back to that. So we've really talked about how to identify people, again, the process. And so what would you say are some of those key barriers that people often have or say they have regarding therapy, and any strategies that you specifically perhaps work around? And I'll just throw out a few just to get the conversation going. So of
Okay.
course people always think about finances and money. So that's
Mhm.
the big thing for people, whether they are, they're insured, uninsured, or underinsured. What is your policy in terms of people who may have to do self pay because their insurance really doesn't cover as much mental health?
Insurance is an interesting topic because I really don't deal with it.
Mhm,
I pay people to do that. So, as far as like for the most part, most people's policies, have it. We're in that smartphone age where you can go and look out if you're going to have a copay and stuff.
mhm,
What's it going to look like if you have a deductible? It's always good to pay attention to your plans because if you have these high deductible plans, a lot of that healthcare you got to pay for, you got to pay for out of pocket until the deductible hits. If you have something like an HSA, you should be putting money away in order to, pay for the expenses. But finance, that's been the real biggest thing. And some therapists tend to have a sliding scale. It's good to ask, do you have something like that? So it's like I have a special type of price where, if I know if you like a single mother and you want your son to get seen, I'm gonna be like, all right, this is here. This is where I'll go. And I tend to kind of set it lower than, something like 150 because everyone's sitting here charging this. And I get it, I understand, but it's like, I don't want to discourage people from therapy. So sliding scale is one thing. Also, a lot of towns tend to have community mental health like facilities that are nonprofit. So we have some in Raleigh where you can go out if you have less insurance and stuff, and you can get the type of therapy that you want. Sometimes they might have a wait list, but it can give you someone. I'm trying to think of other avenues. If you are, spiritual and you're involved in church, if you think something like some pastoral counseling might help or some type of Christian counseling might help, you can go through that avenue. They do have crisis lines like Hope Line, which are free that you utilize in crisis. What's some other things? Sometimes if you're okay with like groups in general. There's a website called NAMI, and they actually do support groups. And you can go through there. They actually have like an anxiety one. I think they have an addiction one that's pretty good. You can actually probably Google support groups and find some that are happening. There's a grief one in Raleigh that the church does. It's really good. Um, so yeah, I think it's just looking out there and asking the question if they have the sliding scale and figuring out what resources work for you. Because I'm going to tell you if you can't do me, I'm going to find someone that can work with you.
yeah.
I'm not just going to just shoot you out there. I'm going to recommend someone that I think or some type of organization that I might know, and then you can go.
Mhm, mhm. Now, one thing I will say, and I know, as you mentioned, that you have those within the organization that handle kind of the finance and insurance things for you, but it also can be jolting for clients to have therapists that, and I get it because I've had therapists in the past who've said it is too much of a hassle dealing with insurance. We jump through hoops and all the craziness and all the changes, and so we no longer take insurance. It is self pay, and you can submit your claims, and good luck to you. But that there is that support of providing you what you need to submit the claim, but that it really being on the person. And so again, thinking about communities of color, often we may not have the high paying jobs where you have a spare $150, even if it's once a month, to put to the side. And so that can be really, really hard for people that they have this wonderful relationship with the therapist. And then now they realize, like, I'm either going to have to make the tough decision of taking myself out of this practice or figuring out a way to find this money. And so the notion that, like you said, that there may be supports available through the community, churches, and others to help them either as they bridge finding new therapists, or either figure out, like, okay, I can only see you once every 2 or 3 months. If I can find other people in the meantime to really help me, then maybe that's enough that I don't lose this relationship, but I also don't go down a financial hole and make myself even more stressed trying
Oh
to
yeah.
afford this service. So
Mhm.
that's really critical.
And some therapists might, work with you. Like we have some people out in our practice that if they work with you for like a long period of time, they'll be like, yeah, this is fine. We can just take this and this is good. And there have been some times with clients where it's like, hey, you're not in network or something like that. And I'm like, all right, I'll take this cost. I understand it's hard out here. Eggs like $7, $5. I get it.
Mhm.
This is fine. This is what I'll take. Get on a payment plan. That's fine. It's okay. And we'll do the work.
And that's appreciated. And I think for many people, it's just that fear sometimes of asking because the no feels so final. And it's not, well, okay, if you can't do it that way, what can we do? And just that negotiation process.
Mhm.
Um, some other barriers that people say often is either the stigma, as we talked about from the beginning, or people being reluctant to share their experiences and their traumas with someone. How do you get past that? And again, just circling to that beginning in the Black community, that often the thought of therapy is, oh my God, you, like you said, you must be crazy. What in the world? So, how do you get to that point? Especially, and we're going to start to delve into looking at gender issues, men in the communities that really struggle with, I am the pillar, I'm, the strong caregiver. Me coming to you represents vulnerability. It represents maybe I don't have it. And so how do you get past working with people individually around that stigma issue? And then even, like I said, if it's more kind of that ethnic thing that we sometimes as a community deal with.
That's a good one. Okay. So I try to normalize it in, the best way possible. From my own experience, I know what it is growing up in the church. And I understand, we need to keep stuff in our family, in this house. And, I try to give education or knowledge to, back against that because, this elephant's in the room. It's been in the room for generations. If we are taught to be generational curse breakers and stuff like that, we need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And for the men, I think it is. I love working with them because it's breaking that stigma. We already do this. We do it in the barbershop. We do it with our boys.
Mm-hmm.
You confide in someone. Now, men might not do it as good as women, but we might do it to a certain extent. So just allowing the space to feel safe enough for them to be able to get that stuff off of their chest
Mm-hmm.
and be able to present themselves in that way. And then I frame it of, men we tend to be driven for like self-improvement. Well, a lot of humans tend to be, but how can we help you be the better type of man? How can we help you be different from your father? How can we help you be better for your son? Do you want him to do this? And they'll be like, no. I was like, so we got to do the work to check ourselves and correct ourselves because our children are watching us. If we're always responding to adversity with a certain type of reaction, they're going to slowly start to mirror that. So I got to go. We need to always examine ourselves and what we're doing, and then let's try something new.
Mm-hmm.
If it don't work, it don't work. But at least you tried.
Yeah. And I think that's good to for many of us to keep in mind is that it is, do you want to do something new? Whatever that elephant is in the room for you is existed. And so if it is something that, as you said, you've identified, you've said, there might be something here, you've already had that step there. And the truth of the matter is that even talking to our friends now, again, women, we tend to go more in depth with our girlfriends and our close associates and perhaps guys do, and really laying it out there. And so there could be, like I said, some of those differences there, but there are still places that we are reluctant to go with our friends because, again, it's so intertwined into who we are. Perhaps our families, maybe you think if I tell someone this, they're going to look at me or my family differently. And so the notion of having someone who doesn't know any of that, doesn't know any of the people and being able to have those conversations. And like I said, whether it includes tissues or just literally having a real talk conversation, I think there is power there. And for many of us recognizing that this type of service is attainable, whether, like you said, it's individual therapy, the community mental health, the churches, or whatever, that it is attainable. And it just is that step of having that first conversation with people. And so when you think about the Black experience and things like that, you mentioned before some of the racism, some of the societal challenges that we are dealing with, particularly with the pandemic. The pandemic shook the world up, but I think as Black people, we've lived with various things for many years or generations. And so the pandemic just kind of laid it bare for a lot of people that some of these supports we had were not really there. But have you seen either an uptick in Black families, Black individuals coming to you as a result of the pandemic, or do you think it still is, it's been relatively steady?
I think I've seen an uptick, and I also think it is just that this newfound generation coming out is really destigmatizing therapy.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of young people come out like, I want this, and with like things like TikToks and therapists marketing themselves out there, I think we all seen like BetterHelp, where they kind of normalize it that it's just becoming more prevalent. But let me see. Yeah, COVID was a very interesting time because we did see a lot, families were stuck together.
Mhm.
Stuck.
Yeah,
together, children and all. I mean,
and
including
all.
marital type of counseling had to be
Yep,
triple fold.
yep.
And, anxiety, isolation, even now, I see a lot of, like, computer people that are still working from home, and we have to do a lot of social interaction type of stuff. So, it's really fundamentally changed how we've done things, but I do like it for the aspect that, we have telehealth so that
Yes.
the barriers and such like transportation, how gas is what it now, you can literally do therapy with me and never see me like
Mhm,
in person. I can provide therapy for someone all the way in, let's say Morehead City, North Carolina, as long as the insurance is good and
mhm.
or, so pay is good. And I think that with the increase in telehealth means that we can reach more people in those rural areas that naturally wouldn't be able to come to Raleigh or, Charlotte, any of the bigger cities.
Yeah, and I also recognize that virtual visit has changed the game for a lot of people because someone, again, it's for your practice. I know you're based in different places, but for someone who lives, let's say in Fayetteville, to think that they're going to get in a car and drive all the way to Raleigh or Cary is not realistic. And so the notion that you can, on your lunch break or right before work or right after work, have that conversation and still get and do what you need to do is really a big deal for people. Are you open to also working odd hours, weekends, anything like that to accommodate your clients, or how do you do that in
I
addition to
feel
the
like
virtual?
every other like Saturday morning, and I see my couples during then, so my marriage counselings during then. But I usually work from like 4 to 7.
Okay.
Sometimes your therapist might have 2 jobs. I'm one of the 2 job folks out here. So, I tend to tell people my hours to see if they can work within them. And I think it really just depends on the therapist. Like if they do it, more full time, they might have, different types of hours. But I have seen some therapists that might do Saturdays or Sundays just because it's preferable to them. I think it's just subjective on the times that they
Mhm.
would just want to do the service, and it got to meet with your availability and whatnot.
Okay. In terms of your work, I think from the bio, you talk to individuals, you talk to family units as well. And so is that inclusive of children? And so I think do you have age ranges that you deal with, or how does it work for the family unit in terms of therapy?
So family, I haven't done any with children just yet, but I would say like I do like more so like younger adults, like teens attaining adulthood and onward for there. But like if there was something that they maybe wanted to process with their family, we can definitely bring those members in and process on it in, a structured type of way, reduce the defensiveness and all that stuff that comes up with it.
And so then as we think about dealing with some of those family problems, that there are things that are individual, but then that, when you combine a number of people together, it can make it better or worse.
Oh yeah.
And so would you say that in terms of the most effective therapy, if you're dealing with someone that's having problems with their marriage, their children and things like that, is it is it necessary to bring those others into that conversation, or is it that you are employing enough of those strategies in terms of the tools you're giving them so that their approach perhaps will show progression? Because as you think about it, if let's say it is a relationship, if you're doing all this work in therapy but your mate is kind of still in that same place, what changes, and is it almost built in as a requirement that at some point that other person is going to have to either, if not come to therapy, at least recognize that what they're doing was a part of that original problem? So is it required really that you have to do that two-parter in terms of whoever your problem person is in your life, that they need to be a part of this?
It depends. Like it would be preferable if they could at least give the notion, but oftentimes I might get men that wives be like, "You need to go to therapy," and they're already in therapy, and
Mhm.
then the men go, "I actually really like this," but I've had some clients where they had a spouse that didn't want therapy, so we had to structure. Well, how can we show up that's different? With how can we learn the tools to have communication different? Because if we ourselves are responding different, they might respond different. How can we notice the signs of, criticism, resistance? How can we just roll with it? How can we check to make sure that we're not in that type of enemy mindset and make sure we ourselves aren't triggered? How can we get our own self care?
Mhm.
Because, if you see someone and they smiling and they looking good and they feeling good, they working out and they got that shine going on, usually you're gonna be like, wow, they changed. I wonder what they're doing. And then you might get curious about doing the same thing too. So
Mhm.
oftentimes I'll get another spouse just like that. The wife is doing okay. The wife is, empowering herself. And then she's like, you should go too. I think that you really would like this. And then the husband's in there. And then usually you don't want to be in there. But then when she starts talking to me, he's like, you know what, this guy's pretty cool. And then he'll start talking about, the relationship and the ways that, he's showing up. Then I'm like, well, all right. Well, your wife might see so and so, and I see you. Why don't we just meet together and talk about this together?
Mhm.
That's how it can happen, but I wouldn't say that it might be a requirement because I know that everyone has autonomy of choice. I think it's better, if you had something like in a relationship type of aspect, and let's say they're being very critical, to bring them in session and let me just observe how a conversation might go. So I can go, well, I might have noticed that you both are responding in this way and it seems very critical. How can we throw an intervention so that we can take more responsibility, say I feel I need statements and do something a bit different.
So I think that it is that glow up where you're like, wait, what is going on? And you're not triggered, or you're not responding to me in that typical way when we have our arguments. And so it does give people pause. Either they're gonna get suspicious at first, and then I'm like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something going on here, like you said, that's really good. So then, as we think about again issues in the Black community, there is that notion of pray it away. It's just like, old school, put Robitussin in it. For anybody that had any health medical
Oh,
issues, it's like just take some Robitussin, some ginger ale, and you'll be fine. So I would probably say in our community, it's that same, let's pray it away. You go to church, you give it to Jesus, you keep it, take it to your grave, and all that stuff. And that really, as we know, that is a strategy, but often there is more that's needed. And so as we start to unpeel those layers of what we've learned from our families and parents and grandparents about how you deal with your issues and really showing up,
mhm.
it leads me to a thought that a friend had actually did a Facebook post earlier today, and she was talking about in the repost, it was essentially someone talking about their father and the fact that he had done all the things. He showed up, he worked hard every day, he supported his kids, he was loving all this stuff, and he was stressed. He worked nonstop to do all the things, and so
Mhm.
no amount of praying, no amount of it's all good is going to stop that. And so for many of us, it's that overachiever syndrome of we need to support each and every person that's in our kind of in our orbit, and we do it to our detriment. And so it is my hope that we get away from that sacrifice mentality of you struggle, you strive, you work nonstop, you do all the things, and you're literally burnt out. All the chronic conditions that we often get as we get older, because
Mhm.
while you may look like they're not problems, you're beaten on the inside. And so, just to bring it back to the purpose of what I do here in terms of Black families and Black parents, are there any key things that we need to think about, either as in terms of our parenting practices, or again our relationships with our children, that may look different than what we experienced with grandma and them from the day when kids were seen and not heard, and that sort of thing? Like how do we get to that point of promoting positive behaviors, mental health within ourselves and perhaps our children, to get rid of some of those generational things as you mentioned?
Okay. So, I'm a proponent for education, look into it. I grew up in that belt, era, and,
Yes.
corporal punishment might, have its trends, but I wonder how can the behavioral type of aspect, how can we do maybe reward and punishment? Um, how can we examine how we show up in these spaces? A lot of the things that I ask with my couples are how much affection did you see your dad give your mom?
Mhm.
You'd be surprised at how many people didn't see their parents kiss. I'm like, what? You kiss in front of your kids? Well, how you expect your kids to show affection? You don't take you ain't supposed to. Well, some people might take their kids on a date, but you don't tell your kids you're taking your wife on a date or something like that, or going out. So they're seeing these things. So we want to make sure that we work on ourselves to present as our best selves because they're absorbing that stuff. Whether or not we think that they see it, they're getting in some way. Social media, we might want to monitor what they're being exposed to on that too, because a lot of kids are getting socialized by, poor types of resources out there. And then when they grow up with a certain type of mentality, it's just like, we have to bar against that, protect against that, and manifest a mentality in them, coming from, I guess, a grounded type of principle. Real big proponent of mentorship. If there's not like, a father in the life, how can we maybe add a father figure there? It's a lot of single parent households with young men that don't have that. I'm a byproduct of that. And when we grow up, we have to try and invent this wheel of what fatherhood looks like and, do it from scratch. So it's good to kind of get involved in a space where there might be some fathers out there that might take on a mentorship so that they can see that type of, relationship.
Let's peel that onion a little bit more for our single parents out there, those who are literally like, I'm doing all the things. So how do I promote self-care? How do I not silence my child in order to like move the process forward? Because a lot of times I think when we try to discipline our children, it is because our coping strategies, we're tired, we're stressed, and it's just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have back and forth. And so we put kind of that corporal punishment label on because it's easier. If you beat a child, they go somewhere and you're like, and we're done with that, but you're not. And so for people who, like I said, not to say that my single parents are doing that, but like what are the strategies for people who are really burning the candle at all the ends and trying to do all the things in terms of promoting their mental health and like I said, that resilience for their kids?
I would say maybe take a step back if you can. I mean, there's some situations where it sounds like to me that that's kind of like a behavioral type of outburst. So that means, we've had it, but they're gonna see that type of behavioral outburst, and they're going, all right, when stuff gets that way, I can do this because my parents are doing this.
Yep.
And then we're gonna go, well, where did they get that from? They never been the type of, why are they talking back to me and why are they yelling like this? Is because they probably seen that you're doing this too. Children, they have fresh minds, and we can't expect for them, always to do what we want. And I think it's just giving that grace to them, but giving that grace to yourself to take the step back,
Mhm.
see if someone might can, step in and provide some form of assistance. I would say maybe look at some resources in which might kind of work for the child. Put the child in therapy. If the child needs to be in therapy, put the child in therapy. Go to therapy with the child if you can. That way you can maybe work on some way to develop something that can work for them, but yourself as well.
Mhm. Hearing the weight of people's worlds all day for however many days a week probably comes at a toll. So for you, how do you as a therapist, how do you handle your stress? How do you handle your self-care so that you're preventing that secondary trauma from all the things that you're absorbing to help someone else? So what does that look like for a therapist in terms of how you're regulating?
Okay. I mean, we're probably going out, going on vacation, doing things that normal people do. But it becomes that space in which you're in that hole, and some of the hole comes out with you. So sometimes when I come home, I might have to just go to my wife like, "Hey, I just need a little bit of a break." And
Mhm.
during that break, I might have to read a book. I might have to listen to music. I might have to play with my dog. So, I'm a practice preach it type of person. I'm not going to tell my clients to do anything that I wouldn't do, So I'm definitely going to make sure that spiritually, physically, emotionally, I'm good. I'm very mindful of stress eating. I think that's another thing that kind of impacts us because a lot of times we might, stress eat. There's nothing like some good sugar to get the dopamine going. So I'm very mindful. If I catch myself going, man, I want some ice cream. And I'm like, well, no, let me get some fruit. So I try to practice good, healthy eating habits. I try to get a lot of sleep. And I try to just slowly do the things that just kind of allow me to break away from, that space. And slowly it starts to happen. So it's good to be mindful if you're getting burnt out. All professionals can get burnt out.
Good. And what you're saying are the exact same things that you're telling your clients. And so I think for a lot of us, it is taking that moment to say, what is happening around me that makes me want to, like I said, pick up that piece of cake or, scream and all that stuff. Like, what is that moment? And for a lot of us, we don't take that beat to say, whew, I want this ice cream because somebody just stressed me out at work or my boss just told me a bunch of stuff and I don't want to do it. But I can eat that ice cream because that's kind of my control at that moment. Just having that reality checked that we're like, no, what is that preceding thing that makes me want to do that? And as a part of that therapy, like you said,
Yeah.
breaking those patterns where we see those things happen. If you always get an ice cream after someone gives you something at work or someone makes you angry, then we start to see that, okay, it's not that you want that ice cream. It is that that's your little blanket. That's your coping mechanism for that situation. And a lot of times I think it's simply with the mental health picture of, again, therapy, that I've had for years, it's we don't want to take that moment to invest in, why am I responding like that? Why did that person trigger me so much? And then recognizing that, okay, I have control over how I react and
Mhm.
respond. And we give our control away, I think, a lot of times. Um,
Definitely. It's
yeah.
a mindful pause, and that will probably save a lot of arguments. I teach my couples, this is where I go. You pause and you go, a gentle check in. Did you say what I thought that you said? And
Without an attitude, like, you can't be like, did you just say?
that's small. Just I heard that you say this. Is this what you meant? That
Hmm.
small thing will curb so many arguments rather than you just flying off the cuff in that enemy mindset. But
Hmm.
we have to do that. We got to take that break to breathe. And
Hmm.
that breath can actually probably reduce a lot of situations for us,
Yeah.
especially if we're 0 to 100 people. We need to learn how to take that breath.
Yes, and get to that basis of why we go from 0 to 100. For a lot of us, that's a scary thing, is not only recognizing that we're going 0 to 100 and also not excusing ourselves from doing that, but why? Like I said, did I see mom and daddy doing 0 to 100 all the time? So if
Mhm.
that's how they drive in that lane, then why wouldn't I do it too? And the recognition that perhaps that's not the way I should, but it's something that happened way back when that's showing up today. Thank you. This has been absolutely amazing. I really appreciate it because I want to talk about holistic health with people. It's not about you going to the gym or running around the block. It's
Mhm.
about what you're eating. Like you said, your sleep. What are you thinking? How are you responding to people? And the recognition that mental health and the various therapies and the practices are attainable for nearly all of us. And that there are free resources if you cannot afford $150, if you have to be self-pay, that there are so many places in between. And I think a lot of times our people need to hear this. And we also need to have that permission to say, you're worth it, to actually seek this help. And that I doubt, and I imagine, I didn't ask you, what's the hardest case you've ever had, but that for many of us, the things we've had, unless it's just a truly horrific kind of childhood, are more typical than not. But most of us think like, no, no one's ever heard this before. And that's daunting to think about, laying yourself bare and potentially having a therapist to look at you like, oh, okay.
That is true. But 9 times out of 10, someone's probably had the exact same situation.
Yep.
Maybe not the exact, but very similar
Very
in
similar.
thoughts that you've had. And even with if we think about just anxiety and all these things, if you do have mental health, that was written because a certain statistical percentage of people identified with these sort of things.
Hmm.
We're not alone, we're relational beings. And I think that is the benefit of therapy, is going into a space and knowing like, hey, everyone else is coming in here probably has talked about the same thing that we talked about. Now my hardest case, if you want to know, was trauma. It was sexual trauma, literally from childhood all the way till like late adolescence. And even with complex trauma, it is possible to develop a place in which you can feel safe. It is possible to, I'm not going to say like, it is possible to practice a form of acceptance and get a form of healing for that. Because I
Okay.
think a lot of us also think what I got is just so deep,
Hmm.
is so hurtful that I won't be whole or I'm undamaged. And that's where you need to be. You need to be in that space, because we don't want anyone to ever feel that type of way. And we want to at least try to do some type of modalities in which we can have you be the best version of yourself despite anything that might have happened.
Thank you for underscoring that. And so, again, for my people who are listening, if you think that the bigness of what you've experienced is so deep and so, like I said, painful, that there's no way out, you are saying that it may take a while, it may be slow steps, but that just trying and getting to that point of unveiling some of that issue, that's going to help someone.
Yeah.
That's really useful because, like I said, there are those people who say, I don't have a big problem. And there are people who say, my problem is so big it could fill this world, and recognition that there is someone who can come alongside you to support them. So, are there any final thoughts you have? So, like I said, just wrapping up what you do, why it's so important to people, anything like that, just any closing thoughts or words you might have.
Okay. God. And for bang. I would say, I think another thought that came to mind is, if we think about the notion of our problems, we have dealt with them for sometimes like, 5, 10 years, all our lives. And I think another thing to do is maybe reframing the notion that therapy is a quick fix. It's going to be very hard for us to go in and in 5 sessions find something that can resolve 10, 15 years of work. So, I would say, approach the space ready to do the work, approach the space with the possibility of allowing yourself to be genuine, vulnerable, and authentic. And, trust in the relationship, because that when the relationship is stronger, usually that tends to lead to a better type of outcome. Now I
Mhm.
can say, it's different from other types of therapy, but Black therapy is amazing. Like I can come in, I adapt clients. We
Mhm.
might talk a little bit about Super Bowl. I got some people I'm talking about Super Bowl right now. And we clinicians of color, I think we bring this form of our culture into this space.
Yes.
Whereas before it wasn't in there. It's kind of like you're sitting in a class and there's a teacher or something. But no, we are making this space and owning this space in our own, and we are making it look like for us a space that can allow anyone to come in there and do the work that they need to do and feel safe and be themselves. So
Mhm.
we want you to be authentic. So definitely consider it. If anything that I said has maybe led you to maybe have that thought or be introspective, call for a consultation. Find someone near you, read what they got going on, see if they might vibe with it, and just, try it out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll provide links to your organization's page. Of course, we have the therapist bio, so if we want to see you all. And I imagine that for some therapists, they're doing in person, but that
Oh, yeah.
many of you are doing telehealth.
It depends. I do a little bit of both. I think I can't. I like both, but it's something about being in the room,
Mhm.
being able to sit and feel that type of connection, spatially with another type of person. So I like in person, but it just depends on, the therapist. Some are doing telehealth, some are doing in person. If you know that in person works for you, do not work with a telehealth person. You find an in person person. If you feel that in person is not it, then try a telehealth. And if that don't work, be in person. So just know that, we work for you.
Okay.
We don't want our clients to, conform for us. You can always find another type of person that fits, your needs.
And that at the end of the day, the wonderful therapist
Oh,
and client relationship is absolutely amazing, but it's not the only one. And so if anything happens with that particular relationship, don't give up. Don't say, I'm
yeah.
not going to keep doing this. I'm not going to ever talk to anyone else. Like, again, take the time, consultations, as you said,
Mhm.
to meet someone else who may be able to come at it a different angle from your previous therapist. But for many of us, like says, that continuity of care, if that relationship is damaged or interrupted in any way, people are just like, no, I'm out. And
Mhm.
just the notion of stay with it, it is so worth it. I think for many of us, we're happier and much more well adjusted than previous generations because we actually talk about our problems and we name them instead of
That-
pretending like there's no problem whatsoever. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you again. At some point, I may try to do a virtual roundtable with other therapists. I would love to have you back if you're willing, but this has been amazing. And I think my audience members will enjoy it. If there are any follow up questions, like I said, if you're okay, I may shoot you a few if anyone has them. Definitely, they'll have the resources if they want to reach out and potentially check you out for services.
That would be fine. That would be fine. I thank you for having me. Love doing this, a way to give back. And I
Mhm.
really like this spaces because, we're showing that we're out here
Yeah,
and, we're showing what it, I won't say what it looks like, but what's good about the space. And I think when we do this and we can get ourselves more in churches and more in the spaces that we are, we can, further destigmatize, the therapy.
absolutely. Well, thank you again and have a lovely weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.